in testnet 1. And we did release our node 8.5 last week. You can take a look at what we're doing in Mercury in our features doc, testnet status. Do take a look at the link if you're curious to know what our testnet plan is. In short, we plan to release a public testnet, which we call testnet 1, next week. It will run on our node 0.9, and it will support the movement, the ability to move tokens for Alice to pay Bob, for example. But you can take a closer look at that page to learn more about what our rollout plan is for the testnet. We invite you to join us at our community test tomorrow at 1400 UTC. We have some exciting things planned to demonstrate and to use some improvements that went into Node over the past week. So I'll talk more about that in a moment, but do feel free to join us if you are new to running a node and you're interested in getting started. This is a great place to come. If you would like to just come as an observer, you're more than welcome. We're really fairly informal there, and that has resulted in a lot of good work, not only for node users, but also for our development team as we suss out bugs. All right, so consensus. We ran a testnet over the weekend, and some really good news there related to node stability. The testnet just plugged right along, doing exactly what it should do, not failing, not crashing, not getting those out of memory errors. So really excellent news there. We did notice some things in terms of slowdown of adding blocks to the DAG. This isn't new. We've seen this. Our community testers have seen this. We've seen this in other places. But with stability under control, and it's really time to start focusing on figuring out how to increase the performance here in terms of adding the ability to add blocks faster. And so to do that, we're taking this on a couple fronts. Number one, we've added metric spans to Casper. And so this provides us more metrics coverage within Casper for a better analysis. We are investigating the possibility of how we record history in our space as a way to reduce time to add blocks. This is a very early conversation. We do recognize that part of this effort might be a significant change in terms of our development plan. We also recognize that it's fairly critical to achieving our Mercury performance goals. So that is a number one priority of the team. We started this conversation in stand up today. We're going to continue it, make sure we understand what the plan is, and then determine what next steps are and the costs related to that. So work in progress, and we really don't have a whole lot to add to that at this point. We did achieve some improved performance by limiting the check depth of the deploy history duplication within Casper. And so this helped us. This was one way that we have been successful in increasing the performance in terms of adding blocks faster. So that's good news there. Really grateful for our community testers during last week's community test. It is a huge thing when you can walk away from a test and say, everybody who wanted to bond as a validator could. And we can absolutely say that after last Thursday. So that was really good news, and many thanks to our community testers for helping to support that. We have since observed some bugs related to bonding. It's not the act of bonding, it's after the fact. And so Kent is investigating the two bugs shown here, 3106 and 1031, and we'll continue to look at that. But many thanks to our testers last week. That was excellent to see. Moving on to cost accounting, we've run into an issue in the investigation of why running out of flow doesn't stop evaluation of other execution branches. There is the sense that the current implementation does not provide enough synchronization, which means that it's possible for not all the branches to know what's going on at the same time, even after the flow has been depleted. So Wukash is testing a theory that replacing ref with mbar will be a resolution, and that the proof of concept PR is in, and we're taking a look at that to see if that would be the resolution and fix this issue in cost accounting as of today. We're so happy with the stability of Node right now, just in terms of it's not seeing, especially those out of memory errors that we were seeing before. And this is largely related to the implementation of the block store, but also to a number of other optimizations that have been put in place over the past few weeks. So feeling really good about that. We have, over the past week, removed round trip from the transport layer and are relying primarily on heartbeat. And this has improved node performance. So we're good news there. And then you can take a look at some of these other improvements that have gone in. You know, the work that Sebastian and Pavel are doing is it's tiny and it adds up. It's kind of like those little chores that you do that, you know, when done in concert with one another, just continue to add to the value and the performance and the reliability of Node. So that's a lot of the work that's gone on here. I will call out, if especially if you are a frequent Node user or participant in our community tests, 3017 and 3011, I mean, sorry, 3017 and 3028 were some kind of nasty bugs that we were experiencing in community tests, just in terms of it made being a node operator a little inconvenient. And so these are resolved and then really going to improve user experience for node operators there. Moving to RSpace, there's tuning work in progress, and this is kind of working on two fronts. One is to offer better support for Casper, as we talked about earlier, with the ability to add blocks faster. And then two is related to work that went in previously of the introducing of F into iStore. We knew that tuning work was going to need to be done, and so that work is in progress. For test infrastructure and performance testing, we are finishing off the work for the monitoring of the public testnet and look forward to using that infrastructure in our testing environment tomorrow. Also, performance testing, we're really focused on performance related to consensus this week, and that's where our focus is as we investigate performance testing. If you're interested in the wallet contracts are now all in dev, and some of them were released as part of Node 8.6. All of them will be released in the release of Node 0.9, but you're welcome to visit GitHub and see all of those contracts in place. We are continuing to do some work to ensure we have adequate support, not only for the signing, but also for the validation of the signature of deployments. And so the team is working as we speak on that. And as always, you're welcome to check out the developer website, and I'm happy to take questions or offer more details if needed.
Greg, I muted your mic. Can you hear me? Because your mic was on.
Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah,
No
I
problem,
understand
no
there's
problem. It's
some
all good.
background noise here. Yeah, no, thanks, Kelly. Like you, I'm very excited that we're now at a level where we can we have enough stability that we can start looking at reasonable fine-grained profiling, and that's already yielding fruit in terms of understanding some tweaks that we can make in order to get much higher throughput, not get these kinds of slowdowns that we're seeing right now. So yeah, I mean, it is a very exciting moment, and it's kind of a sea change moment for us because we're staying up long enough that we can contemplate the real profiling that we need in order to get this network tuned up and kicking out the right kind of transactions per second. So it's it was very encouraging weekend. And I'm very happy to see the kind of response to the profiling information that's happened. The team has jumped right in, without even skipping a beat, jumped right into looking at the profiling data and looking at exactly where the hot spots are and making some pretty considerable proposals for how to eliminate the top hot spots. So more of that will be coming up on the subsequent discussions. Now, I also understand, Kelly, that you guys are going to give us a demo next week of the wallets. Is that right?
That's correct.
Will we have a demonstration of cost accounting, or when is that scheduled?
I need to double check with the team, so I'm not going to make a commitment right now, but it's very soon. And if not next week, then certainly the following.
Okay, very good, very good. That's good news. Yep. And will we get any previews at community testing or?
Possibly and probably, since we've got testing tomorrow, Thursday, and we're still working on our deployment signatures. That's the big kicker to wallets right now, and so they're working on that. We're going to do an internal demo on Friday, following stand up. And so I don't know that we'll see any of that in community test tomorrow. Really our primary goal for community test tomorrow, and you will enjoy this if you have operated Node for a long time. You know that those logs get crazy busy with messages as peers disappear, and all of a sudden you're still continuing to get messages of peers that you thought you were connected to and are no longer. And we've implemented a cleanup strategy that runs on a cadence to help clean up when when you don't need to get messages from those peers anymore. So that's the thing that we're going to look at tomorrow and demonstrate and validate that that's working for everybody. But really looking forward to a little bit more quiet logs.
Yeah, it's it's. I mean, there's a time when you really need the noisy logs in order to figure out what's going wrong. But
Right.
yeah, it's not nice that things are stable enough that we can have a quieter chatter of the node about itself. Yeah, that's very good. That's very good. All right, so let me just ask again from the community if there's any more that they want to ask about what's happening with the development effort.
There was a question in the member Zoom about the testnet schedule. Could maybe you could review that quickly for the testnet?
Sure. I'd be happy to do that.
I have to say that I'm really excited by the stability that's been achieved in the last couple of weeks. It's good to see that hurdle has been largely been passed.
Yeah, thanks for calling that out, Jim. I share that. It's really good news all around to see that stability and to see all the efforts that went into that coming to fruition. So really excited about that. So to your question, so I'm looking at the page. This is the RChain public testnet information page. You can get to it directly from the RChain wiki. So I think many questions can be answered here. Let me specifically call out that this is our rollout plan. Next week we plan to launch a test net.
Kelly, you're going to talk over the testnet calendar?
I thought I was. Can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
Can people hear me?
Yeah,
I can hear you.
I can hear both people.
Greg, I can hear you, and I'm speaking to the calendar right now. So our plan is to launch a test net that has RChain validators. That means that we're going to launch a test net which at Genesis has a series of known validators. We will demonstrate the ability for users operating a node to deploy Rolang to the testnet, and then also the ability to transfer test rev in a Alice pays Bob scenario. And so that is our goal for testnet 1. You can see how that grows over time and what our goals are there. We will provide, when it is available and probably very close to the launch time, much more information about how you can connect to the testnet. So for example, we will provide a bootstrap address and make sure that you have all the resources that you need to start up a node, run the correct version of our node, and then connect to that public testnet to see what's going on. Jim, does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Cool, thanks.
Okay, if there are no other questions, we'll move on to just a few topics. Most of the other topics will be covered in the closed door session on Friday, which is at 11. Channel will be announced in the members Discord channel. But we wanted to, 11 a.m. Pacific time. And on Friday, we'll be having those discussions. There are a lot of updates, but we can't really put them on the public channel. So looking forward to talking to members about that. In the meantime, I did want to say that we've got all the documentation together for the RSong vehicle. So we are ready to go ahead and commit. There are a couple of decisions that have to be made with respect to particular tax implications on that, and that we hope to get sorted out this week or early next, so that we can go ahead and pull the trigger on the formation of the vehicle. We can go into more details on the closed door session on Friday. And let's see. Also wanted to mention that last Friday we had or last Thursday, I guess it was, we had a good podcast, RCast, with Steve Ross Talbot and Isaac Dufresne. We talked a lot about the economics of the proof of stake. And I also wanted to sort of make it clear with that podcast that the economic discussion, how we've approached the market, is not something we just cooked up on the fly. In fact, it goes back to an analysis of the market that began in 2009 and was relatively well formulated by 2014. In 2016, I was already discussing with the RChain legal representation why we felt that this approach to the market was going to result in a much lower, by orders of magnitude, lower spend on user acquisition. It's really, really important to understand that when you're trying to go after network effects, there is a very serious spend that is related to user acquisition for the platform, and we have tons and tons and tons of market data about this that is public with respect to WhatsApp and Facebook and Instagram and all the others. We know how much those networks have had to spend in order to acquire end users, and we know that there are approaches that result in lower spend on those in terms of user acquisition. And so we talked a lot about that in the larger context on the RCast. I do hope people will go give it a listen, because I think it will help people get informed as to how the strategy all hangs together, and why it has been laid out in the way it has been. People should definitely not be thinking that we sort of cook this up, in the last year or in the last few months. It's been a long-term market study, a multi-year market study that resulted in the strategy that we've been following. So if anyone has any questions about that, I would love to take those now, or at the closed door session on Friday.
Did you guys publish any of the market study? Like, anything is published?
Yeah. So we made a lot of that discussion public starting in 2015. The video record of the approach to the market has been basically on this channel here since 2015.
Right.
Community.
Any like documents, or is it just a debrief?
No, we had internal documents, but a part of the process with respect to the internal documentation was to it is a significant advantage to understand how to approach the market. So this is why we've sort of chosen how to release the information. But it's certainly been a part of internal documentation and documentation with potential investors since 2014.
So can members review anything, or is it just gonna stay
well, I strongly recommend that members review the transcripts of the documentation of the most recent podcast. That's a very, very good place to start. You can, but I also recommend that people get facile with the data themselves. Right? It's publicly available data. Two clicks and you've got the spend on from WhatsApp for user acquisition. right?
Okay, thanks.
For that's all publicly available, and it's been publicly available since what, 2012, 2013, something like that. It's now 2019, so the data is 6 years old, and it goes back. I mean, it's an interesting point because it goes back to looking at this from a privacy perspective. When you try to approach the market in terms of privacy, most people don't care. There's only a very, very few people in the market who actually care about it from an information privacy perspective, even though there's a lot of lip service, right? Even the self-sovereign identity, when you get right down to it, the vast majority of end users don't care about self-sovereign identity. And so when you start to look at the data in terms of, how you attract end users to a particular feature set that you know that they ultimately want, but none of the but a vast majority of the features won't move the needle in terms of their day-to-day lives. You have to take a pretty different response. But it also it changes depending upon the market context. So for example, in Venezuela, crypto is suddenly a lot more attractive, and particular kinds of crypto are suddenly a lot more attractive, like Zcash, because privacy of transactions is suddenly at a premium in that market, under those market conditions, right? So these are the kinds of things that do shift as market conditions shift. Yes, Nick.
Hi, Greg. Yeah, I'm just interested. Was this the only approach you've considered? I know you have considered and talked about this for a long time, and I do respect that your analysis. But what I sometimes lack is a comparative approach, in particular where an ecosystem approach could be taken, where several sectors, several industry sectors, each having volume, contribute to traffic on the platform, or
Not
where
only not
the
Nick,
or where
Nick.
the yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah. I mean, the short answer is right in front of you. This is exactly why we funded Pythia and Reflective, so that there was not only a broad-based approach, but an ecosystem approach. So the answer to your question is in plain sight.
Yes, exactly.
And we did do, in fact, we did do a like I said, this was a long-term study where we approached market segments using various different kinds of avenues of investigation to try to figure out exactly what was going to move the needle in terms of network effects.
Yeah, exactly. It's a great one,
Yeah.
and I think that particularly where you get overlaps across those across the end user populations in each of those channels. Also, who is the customer here? It could actually be not, in fact, the end consumer. It could be a third party in that network who is currently struggling. So, you mentioned self-sovereign identity. End consumers aren't interested in that, but banks and relying parties who are facing massive privacy challenges because they have to hold on to targets effectively on large aggregated amounts of data, they are interested in going for that market. So having a performant network to support that would be a fantastic one. So I just think there are quite a lot of other good opportunities out there which are becoming ripe right now. But
we do agree, which is exactly why we took a broad-based approach. We didn't want to put all our eggs in one basket, but we also have seen what's happened with respect to these other approaches. So again, we feel very strongly that the analysis that we've done is more or less inexorable as long as you're focused on a public permissionless blockchain. As soon as you also expand the markets to private or semi-private networks, which our sharding solution provides and supports, then you can go after the other markets. And that's exactly why I said 2019 will be the year of enterprise partnerships, which we are pursuing very, very aggressively.
Yeah, that's the sort of stuff which would be nice to see. That's the sort of thinking which would be. I know in terms of what you can say there's a difference there, but as a strategy, I mean, talking about how you pursue that, making some of those documents available, Rather than being reduced to the one play approach. I think if we can keep to that diverse approach, it sort of makes things look a bit less risky.
Sort of. You have to correlate that to marketing spend. So the more diverse your approach, the much larger your marketing spend.
Yeah, but it's the ecosystem marketing spend, isn't it? It's you have to do enough to get them. It's that marketing spend. That marketing spend can be borne by the ecosystem if you get it right. But
not quite, because, for example, again, this is borne out by experience. What you find is if you do enterprise partnerships, the sales cycle is 18 to 24 months. End of story. Unless
absolutely.
You have.
Yep.
Right,
yeah,
and so and that is highly intensive for several key individuals within an organization.
Yeah, it's unquestionably slower.
But it's not just slower; it's also a higher spend in a particular way, right? So there's a particular kind of spend that goes towards an end user market.
Again, that's why you've got a co-op, and there's a lot of people in the co-op who can help with that. There's a lot of people working in different industries. For instance, I do a lot of stuff in public sector, where you can help, you can punch above your weight. But I'm hogging this. No.
It's good. It's a good dialogue. I absolutely agree with it. It would be really good if there are members who feel that they have ends to, for example, public sector opportunities, or feel that they have ends with other enterprise partners. Please come forward. Work with the co-op. Don't be shy. It's a really, now is the time for those kinds of partnerships, especially as we're getting closer and closer to the launch of mainnet. And this is in part because we know those dialogues take 18 to 24 months. And so, unless they're accelerated by particular kinds of relationships. If we begin it yesterday, then, in the middle of 2020, or the end of 2020, we can see a fruition of that kind of engagement, right? So don't be shy. Go ahead and start those conversations now. Okay, I think that's all we want to cover in the open session, unless there are any questions or comments from the community. Going once?
Well, I'll offer a comment. I'm sorry I didn't get all of the conversation. I just joined a few minutes ago. But in regard to some of the analysis that you're standing on, say with respect to identity practices, I think it's important always to be aware the degree to which this work, because it's social, is necessarily driven by culture, and is necessarily, culture is both iterative and a kind of a quantum object. And so behaviors that may be true for one context may not be true a very short time later because the cultural context will have changed. And you address that somewhat by referencing local contexts. You mentioned Venezuela, et cetera. But also we have the recent work of Shoshana Zuboff and so on that's getting out there, and we have people. She's associated with the term surveillance capitalism. The popular media is engaging that. The question of surveillance capitalism is aligning with various analyses about the economic structure on a planetary scale. And this is obviously the context that the public platform that you've been working on, Greg, is operating in. So I think it's a little, again, based on my experience watching the culture and being engaged in it in the various ways that I have over 35 years, it's always, it's quit being surprising to me, the lack of surprise, or that people in positions of authority and power have when radical change comes so much quicker than they thought it was going to come. actually things change much faster than we expect. And so I offer a recommendation, to the platform here and to yourself to be careful with the use of the we, that we decided this and we did that. And I encourage that we to not be centralized, that we to figure out, despite the problematic character of working with diverse voices and diverse contexts, there is cost associated with a less centralized we function. But I really encourage to follow through on what the co-op offers in terms of addressing the problematic character of a more diverse and decentralized we management layer for the co-op. I think so. I'll just leave my point there and derive from that particular point in the conversation.
Thank you, Rich. I really appreciate your comments, and I think that we are headed in that direction. The co-op is headed in that direction. There wasn't a co-op in 2009 and 10 when we began. The group of us who were marching towards bringing the network to life was doing the market analysis. There wasn't a co-op until 2017. So yes, there was a lot. There were a lot of decisions made that were prior to the existence of the co-op, and over time, we hope that the co-op can become the co-op membership can become more and more informed about this kind of data. I think it would be very useful for people to get facile with the kinds of data that we're talking about, especially if they want to help be involved in decision making. I think that's a great idea. Anything we can do to increase the collective intelligence here is a great idea. Really wholeheartedly supported.
Well, I also think that, I've been disappointed in the management layer over the last couple of months, and I know that you know that, so that's not a surprise. But I do encourage, particularly though in the last few weeks, there's been, what do I want to say? There's just, it goes both ways, I think, that both the community's collective intelligence could be raised, but also the management layer could lean in to the potential value that the community can offer, and I haven't seen that. In fact, I've seen the opposite in most cases, where it's I'm hearing the management layer say something like, "We have done that research," or "We have this information. Our business urgency for this reason or this matter in this context will supersede wisdom or connections that might come quickly from the community." And I'm not diminishing the fact that there is a cost to keeping one's ears open to the community and to doing that skillfully in a way that you can access community value. There's certainly a cost, but I wish that I could see more evidence that there was an understanding that the community really could bring, an existential level of value to its own operation. And sometimes it feels like it's a real uphill battle to make this point to the current management layer. But I've got a few minutes today, so I'm here making it again. But thank you.
Well, I really appreciate your comments. I think what I would say is, like, if you really feel that strongly, then can you organize the community to go tackle some of the problems that we're facing? I mean, just
I've been involved in that, Greg. But honestly, to get down to it, I was helping with people in the governance committee, but it comes down to, I don't have time to go one-on-one with the executive it would be foolish for the governance. It'd just be foolish to be oppositional like that. The co-op is so invested in its trajectory that it really feels like right now the appropriate efficient use of energy is to let the co-op go, hopefully make it through this this current urgent crisis, and then maybe pick up the pieces. But I don't think that the managerial practice that you're giving voice to is the only case, and but it may be the only case that the co-op is able to follow right now because of its limited resources. So that's I guess I'm speaking personally about my position.
Okay. Well, again, like I said, a lot of the practices are a lot of the things that we're facing are have a range of different urgencies. So if there's a particular practical problem, I mean, it seems like you're focused on the raising a topic to the board, which was the major issue that was most recently addressed by the governance committee. And we can certainly support that. I think the board wants to support that. At the same time, the board also recognizes that there are, in fact, 3 avenues of raising a topic to board level discussion, right? So all members are encouraged to approach board members directly. All members are encouraged to approach officers directly, and all members are encouraged to approach the empowered committees directly. So there are already 3 means by which an item of business or other topics can be raised to board discussion, and we're happy to have additional ones that have been proposed by the governance committee. So we're very much in support of that work.
Thank you, Greg. That's appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's something that we all discussed and feel it's important to support.
I think it's also just a part of that. Part of that is some transparency around those topics. So everybody in the co-op, not just the executive, no, everybody, if there's a proposal to be discussed, they need to write down clearly what it is and what it's about and do some pre-thinking on those topics. So part of this is about, getting better structured proposals going through for discussion and people discussing that in the co-op, experts in the co-op, people who are experts, people who have members who feel strongly about things. If they can discuss those topics, write that stuff down, test for their sentiment, so we get an idea of how much support for those topics are, and then put those to the executive. It should help. That's the idea. It should help get things structured better and get things more transparent. So we'll see what comes out of it. But if we go with that, I think that will be a help.
Yeah. So again, we're at least all the board members I've spoken to about this, they are supportive of the proposal, and I think we can push that forward. So that one. So Rich, I think we're doing what we can to help the governance committee as an example, since you raised that particular issue. But I will point out that won't necessarily result in anything like the kind of engagement that will resolve the particular problems that we're facing today. It might, but it's a bit of a long shot. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I mean, the principal gesture of the last 9 months at the co-op has been working with RChain in one way or another. And the principal piece of business that a governance committee would have at this moment would be expressing community agency with respect to the formation of the equity vehicle, which would be necessarily being involved in its hiring, its mission, its structure, or at least if not being involved, giving some guidance on that aspect, which happens to be something that the current staff and leadership around RChain has made clear. Member engagement is not welcome. That at least that's been the attitude that has been represented in the media that's shared with the community, the internal media. And so, if that's the current existential crisis, and the moment in which member agency might be expressed, that's why I was saying before, it's like it's just a waste of energy to have to try to organize a governance committee. At least my analysis, it's a waste of energy to try to operate that in real time with the urgency that this, what our song requires to get out the door, and it would just be a matter of a conflict with management style and the culture that's already been seeded into the Our Song project. So I've chosen to put my time elsewhere than be involved in that process or offering critique where it's not particularly welcome or working for people. So
Okay,
that's my story.
My feeling is the opposite on that, that if the membership is not organized, we can't expect that the leadership is going to organize us. And we can, there's many ways we can organize. There's the governance committee is a good vehicle to maybe help facilitate the organization of the membership. But unless we can be a coherent entity of some sort, we're just noise to the leadership.
Yeah, Jim, I think that's true, but I think I think there are some attempts to make some organization at the board level, I think some time ago, and it would be nice to see some progress, with that. And then because it sort of has to be endorsed by the board, because structure is created, from the board, downwards. Governance committee suggests the structure facilitates it, but the ones which are involved in those big decisions that we're talking about, that is the board level stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, well, we have had board members participate in the governance committee, although I think there's probably some frustration in things not happening fast enough or whatever, but the activity seems to be have an effect. It's worthwhile. We at least put one thing in front of the board, and I think continued engagement of board members in the governance committee would be is what can make it be an effective vehicle for the
that would help a lot,
members to get involved.
Yeah, I think also I need to address something that Rich said, which was the principal gesture of the last 9 months has been our song. That is certainly not the case. The principal gesture of the co-op has been getting to mainnet. That has been our #1 priority and focus. And we're very grateful for all the members who have engaged. We're especially grateful for those who've engaged on the testing sessions and those members who've engaged on GitHub to help either get specs or tests or anything else into better shape. So that's been our #1 priority. And it wasn't until a month ago that we contemplated the idea. In fact, it was less than a month ago because it was just before the last board meeting that we contemplated the idea of building an SPV around our song. We had these assets, and we were certainly not thinking about them as a separate company or an equity vehicle for the co-op or anything like that until just like literally a day before the last board meeting.
Well, I will accept. I accept that that's a fair point, and perhaps I was being hyperbolic about it being the most significant. I would point out that if one looks at the financials, you see that there was a financial commitment in the middle of last year that was 4 times greater than the money put into either Reflective or Pythia that was committed to the.
Actually, again, I really wish to take issue with that. It certainly isn't the case, what you're saying, and the books bear that out. So the books bear out a completely different story, and I will be giving a lot more details about that in the closed session. But what's public shows that what you just said is blatantly false.
Hmm.
But we will be giving a lot more details about this in the closed door sessions. So I can't speak to anything more to that other than the public books do not bear out your statement.
Public books do not bear out the fact that more money was spent on RSong than on development of testnet. What exactly are you saying?
Well, he just compared it to the spend on Reflective and Pythia, and that's certainly not the case. And but your statement is also incorrect, which the public books bear out right now.
My statement was a question.
Okay. Anyway, so that any assertion along those lines is also false. And the books.
I'll just point out that if
but
people want to test my statement and they are members of the community, they can go into the audit channel, and up thread you'll find the documents I was referring to.
Mm-hmm. So again, the audit documents that we just released a couple of weeks ago with the co-op financials show exactly where our liabilities are and what our spends are. And they don't bear out your statements. But I will speak more to that in detail in the closed session. Are there any other topics or questions that we want to cover in this session?
I did want to point out that I think the idea of community organization is a bit of a red herring, right? What most of the co-op members who are interested and willing and skilled enough to do is help themselves help, right? And often the response from the community and from the leadership is, well, okay, go get organized. But what's being offered is not an organization, it's an individual's assistance, right? So I want to make sure that we're talking about the same thing when folks say you've got a lot of skilled and interested people who could do a lot of good. And when other people say the co-op should self-organize, those are different concepts.
I think that's a fair point. Whenever anyone has come forward with a practical path forward, certainly the leadership has taken it into consideration and advisement. So, for example, Chris, when you came forward with a recommendation for council, the co-op leadership took it very seriously. We investigated. We came up with a plan for how to follow that guidance and followed through on it in the time frame that it took to do so. Then there are lots and lots of examples of exactly this kind of thing. So when I know, Rich, you had some very specific recommendations for RSong development, and I took them quite seriously. We walked through them and we discussed exactly what the kind of spend was in order to address your recommendations, and they were far greater than the resources that we had available. So when people come forward with offers of help, always we take them seriously. Always we do our best to try to evaluate them and see how they work out. I have a call coming up in just a few minutes, so I just want to make sure that there's not other topics that we might want to consider.
Just a quick question about organization structure at the operation, particularly I think when Kenny was announcing his departure, I mean, there was discussion there about a revamp of structure. Is that, have you had any further thoughts about that, Greg? Are you planning to do anything or
the board recorded, approved and recorded a revamp of structure, which is still the plan of record.
Yes, but is what's been done to implement that? That was the question. What's the plan?
So
because a lot of this flows, this plea for structure, if you like, it fans out from that, really, doesn't it? That's the core of it.
Yes, and right now we have essentially these are questions that I really have to put in the closed door session. I cannot.
That's fine. That's
yeah.
Fine.
I can't speak to them. I can't speak to them publicly, but I can speak to them in the closed door session.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, good. But thank you for raising those issues. I mean, ultimately, where I'd like to get the co-op is to an even more decentralized arrangement, which is what's reflected in the board, right? Well, ultimately, what we'd like to have is areas of concern that have relatively independent financing and good, solid oversight on each of those areas of concern, from marketing to engineering to governance and so on. And have each of the leaderships of those areas report directly into the board without even necessarily having it all roll up into a single individual. Assuming we can thread the needle here, one of the things that people need to understand is that the game is going to get many, many times more complex. It's going to be very, very hard to keep our hands around the complexity as the network begins to scale up. And again, at a minimum, although we have essentially addressed the issue of mainnet infrastructure, operational infrastructure, by saying that the co-op is going to fund it initially, that leaves some serious security concerns, I think, for those people who are really, really radically decentralist. And what that means is that in order to have a truly secure network from a decentralist point of view, there's about $10 million worth of operational infrastructure investment that has to be spent by parties that are independent of the co-op. I've raised this point several times since October of last year. There's just to build out a network that sort of matches a decentralist profile of security. We're going to have to Tom Sawyer, about $10 million of operational spend sort of across the globe, and that's going to be an interesting and very, very tricky problem to solve.
Yeah, and it goes hand in hand with the end user population discussion as well.
That's exactly right. So that is precisely it. So in order to thread the needle at all, the co-op has to stand up the network and then demonstrate transaction volume, which makes it attractive to others to get involved in.
Yeah, and you need to work out where that compute power might come from. Is it going to come from a mining community, or is it going to come from potentially corporates, or is it going to come from government? There may be many players.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in April of last year, so a year ago, I woke up in a cold sweat saying, how are we going to organize all that compute power, right? And what I proposed to the community, like really, if the community wants to help out, is to go and help organize that compute power, and it should be across all sectors. There should be private individuals, whether they are adventurous entrepreneurs, or it should also be happening at state, local, and federal governments here in the U.S. and similarly in other jurisdictions. It should also be happening within enterprise, and much to my surprise, it turns out that there's also like this incredibly rich and diverse group out there of system engineers who are profoundly libertarian, profoundly decentralist, and engaging those communities and getting them interested is also another place where we really want things to take root and take hold.
Exactly, Greg. Across diverse market sectors, I think that's the point I was coming back to. But still,
but you can't do that until you have demonstrated certain points. They just won't come. And this is
chicken and the egg, isn't it? Really, yeah.
Well, no. We saw it. Like, we actually spent a lot of time from April through August courting each of these different market sectors to see exactly how much interest there was. And we were able to demonstrate unequivocally with a whole CRM database worth of engagement that unless the co-op demonstrates it first, people won't move.
Okay, Greg, this is totally incorrect. I'm sorry to say it like this, but the way you conducted the validator cell killed this whole like security problem that we have now, right?
Okay.
People wanted to commit. There were like over 60 people in the test sessions. I kind of managed to bring 5 people who wanted to get into the validator cell. But for some reason that we can all assume now that we have some information what it was, the way that the validator cell was kind of rushed, pretty much is the main reason why we are in this problem now. So
okay,
I don't know.
I appreciate your perspective, but that's not what the CRM database shows.
Why?
So
right.
I know you
Greg,
have your
This
perspective
is the
in terms
information
of
that comes from you, and all the information flows from you. This is like the most centralized way to run a business.
no, actually no, it
If you
didn't
bring
come.
me other people who can prove that, then maybe you have a case. But,
sure. I
but
can
I was
can
involved
bring
with
other
that
people.
sale. I was helping. So
And were you?
I have
So
my
were
own
you?
information as well.
Wonderful. And were you working with the CRM database?
Well, I brought like 5 people to the CRM.
Okay,
CRM,
so you brought 5 people. So we have hundreds of people in that database. So you have a small percentage.
So this is just
So-
one member, right? That didn't
Yeah.
make any money out of like bringing people who brought 5 people, right?
Okay.
Imagine
and
how many more members.
how much hardware are you talking about in those 5 people?
Like, it doesn't matter because
It
the
really
way
does. It really does. It really
Well,
does. It does matter
doesn't-
because in order to get the kind of backbone infrastructure we're talking about, it's not just any 5 people. We don't just need a bunch
Okay.
of laptops or
Yeah,
a bunch of
understand.
right. What we
totally
need
understand.
very
was at
very
least
significant spend.
backbone. And I know
Oh.
like 2 other backbones in the Asia community that were willing to join. It's the
Good.
fact that the way the sale was conducted, right?
Well,
Okay.
Dror, we can if it was done wrong, another one can be organized.
Exactly. Exactly.
No, Jim.
Unfortunately, though, I have to jump off to another call
Right.
now. But I will. But we can take this up in the call, the closed door session. And I really appreciate. I just want you to understand, Dror, and everyone else. I really appreciate the dialogue, the feedback, the debate. I think this is, democracy is messy, it's noisy, it's argumentative, and I really very, very appreciative of your engagement. But let's continue the discussion on Friday.
Sure.
Ciao.